Okay, so let's dive in. Today, we're looking closely at Ezra Chapter 8. We've got this really compelling ancient account, our aim,
Yeah,
to get what happened, but also, maybe more importantly, see how the wisdom in it, well, how it speaks to us today.
absolutely. Think of it like we're pulling out some key insights
Mhm.
about faith, leadership, managing responsibilities, stewardship, basically, from events thousands of years old, but connecting them right to your life now. Okay, let's get into it.
Right. So the scene starts with this group preparing for a pretty major journey. They're heading back to Jerusalem, leaving Babylon. This is all happening under King Artaxerxes. Ezra's leading them, and straight away he's making a list, very detailed.
Yeah, listing the heads of families, taking careful note of who's actually making this return trip. And what's fascinating there is just how detailed that list is, that genealogy. Ezra isn't just, leading some random crowd. He's meticulously tracking the people. It really highlights how important each person, each family was considered for this journey.
Yeah, that individual importance really comes through. But then pretty early on, they hit a bit of a snag. They gather at the spot by the river Ahava, getting ready to go, and Ezra realizes something crucial is, well, missing.
Right. He looks over the people, the priests who are there, and he notices, no Levites. None at all initially. And the Levites were, well, they were essential. They were the ones designated for service in the house of God, for the temple work.
So that immediately raises a question, doesn't it?
It does. How do you carry out a sacred mission, especially one focused on restoring temple worship, without the minister specifically assigned to that? It's a real problem.
Okay, so Ezra doesn't just sit there. He acts. He sends some of his key leaders, men described as having understanding, off to a place called Cassiphia. Their mission, find and bring back Levites. And also the Nethinim, who were helpers for the Levites.
And the account specifically says, by the good hand of our God upon us, they actually succeeded. They managed to recruit and bring back skilled ministers needed for the temple service. It really shows the importance of seeing a need, identifying the gap, and then actively going out to find the right people for the job, all while trusting God's helping hand in it.
Okay, and this next part is where it gets, for me, really interesting. Before they actually start the journey back to Jerusalem, which they know could be dangerous, Ezra calls for a fast, right there by the river. Why a fast?
Well, the text is pretty clear on this. They fasted to afflict themselves, to humble themselves before God. They were seeking a right way, God's guidance for themselves, for their children, and for all their possessions they were bringing.
So it wasn't just a ritual.
Not at all. It was deep spiritual preparation, a real acknowledgement of their dependence on God for a safe trip.
And the reason they felt this intense need for God's protection specifically is quite revealing. Ezra says he was actually ashamed to ask the king for a military escort, soldiers and horsemen for protection.
Exactly. And think about why. They had already made this bold declaration to the king. They told him that God's hand, his favor and protection, is on everyone who seeks him, but his power and wrath are against those who forsake him.
Ah, so asking for soldiers.
Would have looked like they didn't really believe what they just said, right?
Yeah.
It could seem like a contradiction of their professed faith.
So instead of the practical, worldly solution,
They chose active trust. They leaned into their faith in God's protection rather than relying on human strength or royal favor for security.
they fasted, they pleaded with God.
And the scripture just says, he was entreated of us.
Huh.
Basically, God heard and answered their prayer.
Wow. So, okay, no soldiers, but they have this incredibly valuable cargo to transport.
That's right. Significant amounts of silver, gold, and holy vessels, meant specifically for the temple. We're talking major wealth.
And they entrust this to 12 of the leading priests.
Yes, and they didn't just hand it over. They
Yeah.
weighed everything out meticulously. The text even gives specific amounts, like 650 talents of silver, 100 talents of silver vessels, another 100 talents of gold, 20 gold basins, 2 vessels of fine copper, precious as gold.
That sounds like an enormous amount.
It was a fortune. A talent was a huge unit of weight. And Ezra gives these priests a very serious charge. He reminds them, you are holy to the Lord. The vessels are holy also. He's emphasizing the sacred trust.
They had to guard these items with absolute integrity until they were safely delivered in Jerusalem. That's immense responsibility.
Absolutely immense.
So then they set off from the river Ahava, 12th day of the first month. What happens on the actual journey?
Well, the account puts it simply. The hand of their God was upon them. And because of that, he delivered them from enemies and from ambushes along the way. Their spiritual preparation, their act of trust, It had a direct, tangible effect on their safety.
So their faith wasn't just a feeling, it provided real protection.
That's what the text indicates, yes.
And when they finally arrive in Jerusalem, after resting for 3 days, they immediately go to the house of God. They weigh out the silver, the gold, the vessels again. Everything accounted for, just as planned.
Total accountability.
And they don't just deliver the goods. They also offer burnt offerings, specific numbers again.
Right. 12 bullocks for all Israel, 96 rams, 77 lambs, 12 male goats for a sin offering. These weren't just random numbers.
What does that signify?
Well, it shows this wasn't just the end of a logistical task. It was an act of worship, of profound thanksgiving. They paused deliberately to give credit and thanks to God for their safe arrival and the successful completion of the mission, and they also delivered the king's commissions, securing that official backing.
Okay, so that's the story. An incredible journey thousands of years ago. But, what does it all mean for us? How does this ancient account connect to modern life?
Well, I think if we step back and look at the bigger picture, Ezra's journey gives us some powerful principles. First off, that decision to fast and pray instead of relying on the king's soldiers, that's huge.
It really is.
It shows that faith often requires action and humility. It wasn't passive waiting. It was an active trust in God's promised protection.
That is challenging, isn't it? Because the logical thing, the worldly thing, would be to take the soldiers. It kind of encourages obedience by showing us that sometimes God's way looks, well, less practical on the surface, but prioritizing it, like fasting before a big decision or a move.
Yes, seeking his guidance first.
Strengthens our faith, doesn't it? Because when we choose that path and see God come through, like he did for Ezra, it proves his reliability in a really personal way.
Absolutely. And then second, look at Ezra as a leader. He wasn't trying to do it all himself. He saw the problem, no Levites. He actively recruited the right skills. He delegated massive responsibility to that treasure, but he also built in accountability.
That meticulous weighing before and after.
Exactly. Holding people accountable for what they were given.
And that feels incredibly relevant today. I mean, whether you're leading a work team, a volunteer project, even just, organizing a family thing. Good leadership involves trusting others, empowering them with clear roles,
Fair expectation.
and ensuring integrity, especially when handling things of value, whether it's money, resources, or responsibility. It encourages obedience by modeling responsible leadership.
And it strengthens faith too, right?
Mhm.
Seeing how working together, trusting others under God makes things happen.
Definitely. Which brings us to that third point you mentioned earlier, stewardship.
Yes, honoring sacred things with integrity. The way Ezra and those priests handled the temple treasures, that care, that reverence, it reflects the importance of how we handle anything God entrusts to us.
Steward it well. It encourages that obedience, doesn't it? Treating what God gives us, our time, our abilities, our resources, maybe even relationships with the seriousness they deserve because they're from him.
And it strengthens our faith. Because when we're faithful in handling the small things he gives us with honor, we build a track record, both for ourselves and in our relationship with him, that prepares us for bigger things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And finally, the outcome itself. God protected them, despite the very real risks. It shows that God honors that kind of committed faithfulness. Their trust wasn't misplaced. Their spiritual prep work had a direct physical result. Safe passage.
And crucially, they didn't just get there, wipe their brows, and say, phew, done.
No, they stopped. They worshiped. They gave the offerings. They explicitly acknowledged God's hand in their success.
We need to do that too, right? When we reach a goal, finish a tough project, come through a challenging journey in our own lives,
Wow.
taking that time to thank God, to celebrate his faithfulness, give him the credit, it encourages continued obedience by keeping our focus on him, and it definitely reinforces our faith for the next challenge.
For sure. This deep dive into Ezra 8 gives us so much, really. That active trust, even when an easier human way is offered. The importance of careful delegating leadership, stewarding things with integrity, and remembering to celebrate God's faithfulness.
It's such a powerful reminder that these ancient accounts aren't just stories. They hold timeless wisdom for our modern lives. They really do encourage us to live obediently and strengthen our trust in God's ways.
It certainly does. It paints a picture of bold faith, yes, but one that's rooted in humility and also in really careful preparation. And that's a path God seems to honor and protect.
So, as you reflect on this account on Ezra's journey and his, radical trust, maybe here's a final thought for you. Do you trust God's protection enough to act boldly and humbly even when facing your own challenges?